Summer 2010, liquor store in Baltimore. I'm scanning the shelves the way you do when you've been doing this long enough to know what to look for. My eyes lock on this bottle of Old Forester, bottle and bond. I ask to see it, and sure enough, you look on the tax strip, it says, distilled 1970, bottled 1975. This bottle had been sitting on the shelf for 35 years. The damage? $15. The system I used to find it, I'm going to walk you through it. Not because the bottles are still sitting out there, waiting. Most of them are gone. But the market that created them, that's starting to look familiar again. $16.1 million barrels aging in Kentucky. Production cut 28% in 2025. Jim Beam closed their Claremont facility for all of 2026, and Brown-Forman laid off 650 employees, and over 50 distilleries shut down last year. The market is resetting, and the last time it looked like this was the 1970s and 80s. Bourbon sales went soft, distilleries kept running, warehouses filled up, bottles sat on shelves for years, sometimes decades, but nobody was buying. That era created the hunting grounds. Some of those bottles are still out there. You would think that after 40 years of bourbon enthusiasm and a generation of collectors, every dusty bottle in America would already be found. But the stores that produced the best finds weren't the ones people were looking in, and they still aren't. Most people think dusty hunting is wandering into a random liquor store and hoping to find something. That's not a strategy, that's tourism. Here's what we actually did in D.C. We pulled a listing of every retail Class A liquor license registered in the city, uploaded the location data, plotted every store on a map, divided the city into quadrants, built a route, and worked through it store by store. 247 stores, quadrant by quadrant, over the better part of a year. Systematic. You'd think that level of preparation would guarantee a smooth experience at every stop. Well, it didn't. We took the same approach in Baltimore, a regular hunting ground for us. That's where the bottle came from the open. Not every trip went smoothly. One owner watched us walk to the door and locked it, and nailed to the plexiglass window. We're only there to buy souvenirs. He wasn't wrong about what we were doing, but he was wrong about the souvenirs. We moved on because that's also part of the system. Not every store opens up, and the ones that don't tells you something too. One day in D.C. produced a remarkable haul. 3 Old Foresters distilled in the 1960s, a 1969 JTS Brown, a 1968 Old Overholt Pennsylvania Rye, 32 bottles of Old Taylor in 200 ml format, a 1990 Wild Turkey 8-year 101, and that was split 4 ways. That's what preparation looks like. Technique 1, the bottom date code. Most bottle manufacturers mold a 2-digit date in the bottom of their bottles. That's the year the bottle was produced, and since distilleries don't stockpile empty glass, that's effectively the bottling year. Flip every bottle that looks interesting, find that number, everything starts there. Technique 2, metric versus standard. Before 1980, American bottles used standard measurement, 4/5 of a quart, a pint. After 1980, metric took over, 750 ml, 375 ml. A bottle that says 4/5 of a quart tells you it predates 1980 without reading another word on the label. A bottle showing both measurements puts you in the transition years, roughly 1978 to 1980. Technique 3, the UPC. No barcode at all means pre-late 1970s. A barcode starting with 88508, well, that's Stitzel-Weller. 88076, that's what came after the brand changed hands. The label still reads Old Fitzgerald, but the whiskey inside was distilled at Bernheim, not Stitzel-Weller. The UPC alone won't tell you everything, but combined with the other indicators, it starts to confirm a picture. Technique 4, the DSP. Bottle and bond whiskey is required by law to display the distilled spirits plant number, the federal registration number for the actual distillery. DSP KY414, that's the Brown-Forman Distillery in Louisville. It's a number on the bottle from the open. Knowing those numbers by memory is the difference between someone who collects and someone who just buys. Technique 5, the age statement and proof. Distilleries lower proof to stretch margin. They dropped age statements to hide younger whiskey. Here's an Old Forester in 1961. The bonded at 100 proof and what they called lighthearted 86 version. Lighthearted. During the glut, bottles were often labeled at the minimum age, even when what was inside was older. The tax strip tells you. Do the math. This is from one trip. The stores that produce these bottles are stores people would typically drive by. They're neighborhoods people wouldn't think about visiting. Owners who had stock really didn't know what they had. In one store, a local told me the whiskey was no good, it was too old. I disagreed and it came home with me anyway. One of the best finds I ever made followed the same pattern. A bottle of Old Fitzgerald, bottle and bond, distilled 1965 and bottled in 1971. I found it in 2007. 36 years on a shelf. $11.95, and I bought 2. That bottle isn't in the collection anymore, but the pattern that put it on that shelf is the whole story. Here's what the glut actually produced. Bourbon aging longer than the label said because nobody was buying it. Labeled at minimum age when it finally moved from distilleries that no longer exist. Stitzel-Weller, Old Taylor, Old Quaker. The tax strips are gone. The window that produced those bottles is closed. The honest truth about where we are right now, the current correction is early. Production is down, but inventory is building. But the bottles sitting on the shelves today are not the same thing. The distilleries that produce the Dusties, they're gone. What's accumulating now is a different era entirely. Understanding what created those finds is still valuable because markets have memory and this pattern has a shape. This is not a tutorial. The window that produced these finds is largely closed. The bottles from Stitzel-Weller, Old Taylor, Old Quaker that were sitting on the shelves in the mid-2000s, most of those have been found. What the system teaches you is pattern recognition, how a market produces overlooked inventory, how the economics of a glut create time capsules, how to read a bottle like a document and not a product. The collector who understands why those bottles existed is better positioned to recognize what comes next than the collector who was just lucky enough to find them. The current correction is not the 1970s glut. The scale is different, the distribution is different, and the collector awareness is different. But the underlying dynamic, overproduction followed by soft demand followed by accumulating inventory, that dynamic is not new. Bourbon markets are cyclical. The glut created Dusties. The shortage created the allocation frenzy. The correction creates something else. What that something else looks like, that's worth paying attention to. This bottle sat on the shelf from 1975 to 2010, 35 years. The owner was happy to get rid of it. The system that found it wasn't complicated. What it required was knowing what to look for before anyone else did. If you enjoyed this content, I would appreciate a subscribe or drop a comment or a like down below. Until next time, pour thoughtfully, draw slowly, and savor the journey. See you in the next one.